The Burnhams. The Burnhams were Protestant missionaries from the United States who served in the Philippines with the New Tribes Mission for 17 years, starting in 1986. On May 7, 2001, the Abu Sayyaf Group, a terrorist organization in the southern Philippines, kidnapped them amongst others. While some hostages were either killed or freed after ransom payments, the Burnhams were held captive for over a year. The kidnappers demanded $1 million for their release. Although a ransom of $300,000 was paid, the kidnappers still refused to let them go. The Abu Sayyaf Group was mainly motivated by ransom and political power. Kidnapping for ransom is a common tactic used by terrorist and militant groups. They do this to fund their activities and pressure governments. On June 7, 2002, during a rescue attempt by the Philippine Army, Martin Burnham was shot 3 times in the chest and died. Gracia Burnham was wounded in her right thigh, but survived. The Philippine Army and other intelligence agencies conducted extensive operations to locate the Burnhams. They used a combination of human intelligence, electronic surveillance, and reconnaissance to track movements of the Abu Sayyaf Group. After her release and Martin's death, Gracia returned to the United States with her 3 children. She written 2 books about her experiences, In the Presence of My Enemies, 2003, and To Fly Again, 2005. She also established the Martin and Gracia Burnham Foundation. The Burnham story highlighted the struggles of hostages and difficulties in conflict zones. It raised awareness about the importance of humanitarian work and the risk it involves. Through her books and foundation, Gracia Burnham continues contributing to humanitarian cases, inspiring others with her story of endurance and faith. Eloá Pimentel. The Eloá Pimentel hostage crisis involved the kidnapping, hostage situation, and murder of 15-year-old Brazilian girl Eloá Cristina Pimentel. Her ex-boyfriend, Liddenberg Alves, committed these crimes. He also shot her friend, Nayara Silva. The incident gained widespread media attention due to the police's mistakes and the fact that Eloá was held hostage for 100 hours. This was the most extended kidnapping ever recorded in Sao Paulo. On October 13, 2008, Eloá, Nayara, and 2 friends were working on a school project at Eloá's apartment in Santo André. Suddenly, Eloá's 22-year-old ex-boyfriend, Liddenberg Alves, broke into the apartment with a pistol. He quickly released the 2 boys, but kept Eloá and Nayara as hostages. The Special Tactical Actions Group closely monitored the situation. On October 16th, Alves released Nayara, but the police suggested she return to the apartment. She agreed and was taken hostage again. Hours later, gunshots were heard from the apartment. The Special Tactical Actions Group decided to storm the place. They eventually overpowered and immobilized Alves, but not before he had shot Eloá twice, once in the head and once in the groin. He also shot Nayara in the face. Eloá, severely wounded, was rushed to the hospital. However, she was brain dead due to the injuries and later died. Alves was convicted of multiple charges and sentenced to 98 years and 10 months in prison, though Brazilian law limits actual time served to 30 years. Father Jenco. Father Lawrence Martin Jenco was born in Joliet, Illinois in 1934. He was in Beirut as part of a mission serving as the director of Catholic Relief Services, an organization that provides humanitarian aid, particularly to the poor and vulnerable. He was taken hostage in Beirut in January 1985 by 5 armed men. He was held for 564 days before being released and returning to the United States. He was kidnapped as part of a broader strategy by Shiite militant groups likely connected to Hezbollah during the 1980s in Lebanon. The primary reason for his kidnapping included political leverage and opposition to Western influence. In his book, Bound to Forgive, Father Jenco shares the story of his kidnapping and imprisonment. He describes how his faith kept him strong during his captivity, where he spent much of his time praying and meditating. He even made a rosary out of threads from a sack and secretly celebrated Mass whenever possible. Father Jenco was often held with other hostages, including Terry Anderson. Together, they worshipped in what they called the Church of the Locked Door. He suffered from severe eye infections and other health problems during his captivity. He was often moved from one hiding place to another and endured beatings from the guards. Toward the end of his captivity, one of the guards asked Father Jenco if he forgave his captors. Father Jenco chose to forgive at that moment, letting go of revenge and retaliation. There isn't clear evidence of ransom being paid directly for his release. However, his freedom might have been part of a larger, more complex deal. This deal could have involved political concessions or indirect financial incentives. Patty Hearst. Patty Hearst, now known as Patricia Hearst Shaw, is an American heiress, socialite, and occasional actress. She is the granddaughter of publishing mogul William Randolph Hearst and the great-granddaughter of millionaire George Hearst. The Hearst family is one of the most prominent and wealthy families in American history, known for their vast media empire. On February 4, 1974, 19-year-old Patty Hearst was kidnapped from her apartment in Berkeley, California by members of the Symbionese Liberation Army, a radical left-wing group. The SLA sought to overthrow the U.S. government, which they believed was corrupt. Hearst was held captive and reportedly abused and brainwashed by the group. After about 2 months, the SLA released a recording in which she announced she had joined them, adopting the name Tanya. Following her apparent conversion, Hearst participated in SLA activities, including a bank robbery in San Francisco. Her involvement shocked the public, leading to questions about whether she had been truly brainwashed or willingly joined the group. In September 1975, Patty Hearst was arrested. Her trial became a media sensation. Despite claims of coercion and brainwashing, she was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, though her sentence was later reduced by President Jimmy Carter. In 2001, President Bill Clinton fully pardoned her. Roy Hallums. Roy Hallums, an American contractor, was kidnapped in Iraq on November 1, 2004. His kidnapping was part of a broader strategy by insurgent groups to gain political leverage and oppose Western influence in Iraq. He was held captive for 311 days before being freed on September 7, 2005. On the day of his kidnapping, 20 gunmen stormed the compound where Hallums and his co-workers were working. They were taken hostage, though some were released shortly after. In January 2005, a videotape of Hallums was released showing him with a gun pointed at his head as he appealed for help. Hallums was freed during a raid by American troops on a farmhouse south of Baghdad. After his release, he expressed deep gratitude to those involved in his rescue and reuniting with his family. Iran hostage crisis. The Iran hostage crisis began on November 4, 1979. On that day, Islamist students took over the American embassy in Tehran. This was the result of growing tensions between the US and Iran. Earlier that year, the Iranian Revolution had overthrown the Shah of Iran. The Shah had been a strong ally of the US. After his overthrowing, the revolutionaries saw the US as an enemy. When the US allowed the Shah to enter for medical treatment, it caused outrage in Iran. Many Iranians feared that the US might try to bring the Shah back to power. In response, the students stormed the embassy. They took 52 American diplomats and staff members hostage. They demanded that the US stop interfering in Iranian affairs. They also wanted the Shah returned to Iran for trial. In April 1980, the US tried to rescue the hostages with a mission called Operation Eagle Claw, but it ended in disaster. Mechanical problems, bad weather, and poor coordination led to a collision between a helicopter and a transport plane. 8 American servicemen died, the mission was aborted, and the crisis dragged on. The hostage crisis finally ended with the signing of the Algiers Accords on January 19, 1981. Algeria brokered the agreement. The US agreed to release frozen Iranian assets and promised not to interfere in Iran's internal affairs. In return, the hostages were freed on January 20, 1981, the same day Ronald Reagan became president. Terry Anderson. Terry Anderson was an American journalist working as the chief Middle East correspondent for the Associated Press. On March 16, 1985, he was kidnapped in Beirut. His abduction was part of a broader strategy by Hezbollah, a Shiite militant group supported by Iran. They wanted to gain political leverage against the United States and other Western countries. Terry was a high-profile target because he was a prominent journalist. His kidnapping sent a strong message to the international community. It highlighted the volatile situation in Lebanon and the dangers faced by foreign nationals in the region. Journalists were especially vulnerable due to their visibility and the significant impact their capture would have on global media coverage. Anderson was held captive for nearly 7 years, or 2,454 days. This made him the longest-held American hostage in history. His long detention showed the extreme measures Hezbollah used to assert its influence. It also highlighted the immense challenges faced by those trying to secure his release. Ingrid Betancourt Pulecio is a Colombian French politician and anti-corruption activist. She was kidnapped by the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia on February 23, 2002. Colombian security forces rescued her on July 2, 2008 in Operation Jacques. Along with Betancourt, 14 other hostages were freed, including 3 Americans and 11 Colombian police officers and soldiers. Betancourt was held for 2,321 days while campaigning for the Colombian presidency in rebel-controlled areas despite warnings. Her kidnapping received global attention, especially in France due to her dual citizenship. She has won several international awards, including the Légion d'honneur and the Concord Prince of Asturias Award in 2008. Frank Sinatra Jr. On December 8, 1963, Frank Sinatra Jr., the 19-year-old son of the legendary singer Frank Sinatra, was kidnapped from his hotel room at Harrah's Lake Tahoe in Nevada. The 3 kidnappers, Barry Keenan, John Irwin, and Joe Amsler, were desperate for money and believed abducting Sinatra Jr. would be an easy way to get rich quickly. They demanded a $240,000 ransom from Frank Sinatra Sr., who, fearing for his son's life, agreed to pay after a few days of tense negotiations. The ransom drop took place in Los Angeles, and shortly after receiving the money, the kidnappers released Sinatra Jr. unharmed on December 10th near Bel Air, California. Due to information provided by Sinatra Jr., the FBI quickly tracked down and arrested the kidnappers. During the trial, the defense tried to argue that the kidnapping was a publicity stunt orchestrated by Sinatra Jr. to boost his career, but this claim was swiftly dismissed. All 3 men were convicted and sentenced to prison, though they were later released on parole. The kidnapping captured widespread media attention and became one of the most infamous cases in American history. The ordeal deeply affected Frank Sinatra Sr., who reported carrying a roll of dimes with him at all times afterward, a habit stemming from using payphones to communicate with the kidnappers. This small act became a lasting reminder of the harrowing event until his death in 1998.